Hey, it's Val, and in this video, I am going to share with you the 8 divorce to-dos if you are going through the separation and divorce process or contemplating going through the separation and divorce process. Now, because I've been a divorce lawyer for more than 25 years, yes, a long time, and I have done literally thousands of divorces for people, I, well, it's not my first rodeo in terms of having a very, very good idea as to the steps that people need to take when they're going through the process. And over the years, I've been able to distill down kind of to 8 kind of important steps you want to take to ensure that the process goes as smoothly as possible and efficiently as possible. And of course, where you are saving time, money, all those kinds of resources so that you can get on with the future life you deserve. And so here is my list of 8 things. I want you to stick around to the end of this video because at the end of this video, I am going to share with you what I think is the boom chakalaka, the best piece of advice possible. So first of all, and I am regularly amazed at how many people do not have this in order despite being intelligent, organized, otherwise well-educated people, how much they actually don't know about their finances or where they haven't organized their financial picture. So if you are either contemplating going through a divorce or someone's told you they're divorcing you or whatever, one of the things that you really want to make sure that you do is that you have a good understanding of your financial picture. What do I mean by that? Well, you want to make sure that you list all of your checking accounts and their bank and their account numbers and what bank. And if you have credit cards, what the name of the credit card is and the balance on those, the balances in your accounts. If you have a mortgage, the balance of your mortgage. If you own properties, your home, what is the approximate value of that? If you have other properties, what are the approximate values of those? And what's the legal description? And what is the address of those? And what's the estimated value of those? All of that stuff. If you have cash on hand, if you have, precious metals on hand, make sure that you have listed all of that stuff out. Plus, ensuring that you have a very clear idea of what you and your spouse's incomes are. So you want to make sure that you have everything gathered and listed in a really good spot, so that it's accessible and that if you go and retain a lawyer or you meet with a lawyer, that you have all of that information in one place. Again, making the process much easier, making the people who are advising you making their jobs easier to advise you, which of course is lighter on your pocketbook, so to speak. The other thing is that after you've listed your documents, you've gathered your documents, I know I'm jumping ahead by a lot, but it's really, really important. And that is after you get your final agreement done, everything signed, sealed, and delivered, you want to make sure that if you have any joint credit cards, lines of credit, any other obligations with your spouse, that those are closed off, or there's an agreement as to how them being closed off is going to go. The other piece regarding the financial area of things is that a lot of times when people are going through a separation and divorce, they kind of stressed out, not really paying attention sometimes. And you want to make sure that you're protecting your credit through that process. So for example, that even though you're going through this process and maybe even though you're not living in the family home at this point, you want to make sure if your name's on that mortgage, that it's being paid. You want to make sure that your credit card, at least their minimum balances are being paid and all of that kind of stuff to ensure that, that you don't end up messing up your credit rating either. So again, your finances, having them nailed down will save you a lot of question marks later, but also a lot of stress and expense. Number 2, you want to make really sure about is that you've actually have your hands on copies of or gathered all of your other documents, whether that be your will, powers of attorney. Oh, wait, and how about this one? A marriage agreement or cohabitation agreement. Now, if you've followed me for any length of time, you might have heard this story already, But let me tell you why it's important to bring to your lawyer the documents, especially a cohabitation agreement, and that they should know about that sooner rather than later. So I had this client, he was with his spouse for, I don't know, over 20 years or something like that. They had 2 kids, and the house wasn't in his name. And he said, no, he would just give his spouse, they weren't married, he would give her a portion of his paycheck every payday. And then you have a little bit left over to spend for himself, and life would go on. And then she'd pay the bills and that kind of stuff. And at one point, he said to me, "Oh yeah." And one time, she told me to sign this piece of paper that said that that all of the assets were hers. And I said, well, do you have this piece of paper around anywhere? He said, oh, no. And plus I said, oh, I've signed this under duress, he said. And I'm thinking, okay, well, piece of paper she sticks in front of his nose, no big deal. Like no legal advice. Did you get legal advice? No, nothing like that. Right. So we go to the mediation, and what do I find out at the mediation? And it's a good thing we didn't go to trial, because believe me, he would have been hooped at huge expense. Was that he, years before, because he had, taken the party's money and gambled it away at one point, which was made her very unhappy for good reason. And she had created or hired a lawyer to have him agree to never go after the house or any other of her assets. And it was a legally binding document. He obtained independent legal advice. So this wasn't some scrap of paper. It was actually a legally binding document. Now, ultimately, we were able to settle that case, no problem. The point being is that what he just kind of talked about, passing over our discussions of something that was completely irrelevant and sounded irrelevant to me based upon what he was saying to me, based upon his narrative. Sure, it didn't seem like it was important at all. Well, actually, it was important. So my point being is that if you have any documents that you have signed with your ex or relating to your ex or your soon-to-be ex that talks about property or support or anything like that, even if you don't think it's relevant, if you're talking to a lawyer, make sure your lawyer takes a look at that. So the number 2 thing, as I was saying, in your divorce to-do list is, of course, gathering up all those important documents. Going back, number 1 in your divorce to-do list is, making sure your finances are all figured out in order, as in they're listed, and the account numbers, etc. And hopefully statements, copies of all the statements, at least for the last few years. 2, other important documents. So number 3 on your divorce to-do list is, of course, you want to change your passwords. Now, chances are, if you have shared the same computer or have left your laptop lying around or your phone, you have probably shared that password with your spouse at some point in time, or you have a password that's super easy to remember. For example, I had a dog named Dogger, and my password for everything was Dogger or Dogger12 for years. And anybody who knew me at all would know that. Well, I wonder what Val's password would be. It was probably Dogger, sure enough. And so the thing is your spouse probably knows that too. And I'm not saying you want to be, particularly if you're living in this under the same roof, or you use, web-based email such as Gmail. The point being is that, they can probably get into your email, and you want to make sure that they don't do that, particularly if you're having confidential discussions with your lawyer or someone else, or strategic conversations with your lawyer or someone else. Now, I'm not saying you want to be shifty or shady or anything like that. However, you don't want to basically share, the legal advice you're getting, with your ex, because that's probably not going to be very helpful for you in the long run. I've seen over the years, I've had cases where I literally feel like the other person's spouse is one step ahead of us. And it's occurred to me saying, have you changed your password? Oh yeah, no, I haven't done that. Let's change your password and see if the dynamic shifts. And sure enough, it shifts because the other person isn't snooping in their email and confidential communications with their lawyer. Oh, hey, it's me. Interrupting a little bit because I want videos like this to reach more people. So if you are enjoying what you see, if you're finding it helpful, please hit the subscribe button, which is somewhere up there. And also tell me, what was the biggest takeaway you had with respect to this video? Leave it in the comments below and I will answer every comment, every question, because that's what I do. The next thing you're going to want to do in your divorce to-do list is prepare for your first conversation. So if you are the person who's ending the relationship, making the choice to say, nope, this relationship, this marriage is not going to continue anymore, or relationship if you are not formally married, well, in that particular case, what you want to do is you kind of want to be ready and kind of have a, prepare to have a talk with your spouse and basically set the tone. And what I mean by setting the tone is you want to set the tone so that to say, look, you know what? We're not going to be together anymore. I'd like us to move forward, to separate. And you want to be able to assure them. And, I would like to do this on an amicable basis. And I think you do too. Something like that. So what you're doing, and if you hire a lawyer will write, like ultimately after you've had that discussion, your lawyer might invite them to a litigation type process, like whether that be mediation or something. And again, you want those first conversations to assure the other side, look, I'm not going for the jugular here. I'm wanting to make sure that we can get through this process, have a legally binding agreement, and do it as amicably as possible. The other conversation, of course, you want to have is with your kids, and you want to prepare for that. Depending on your kids' ages, you might want to do some research in terms of, okay, what's the best way that I can have a conversation with the kids, and what's the kind of information that they require, or what kind of questions might they ask based upon their needs. Better yet, if you and your spouse are amicable enough, if you can have the conversation that you've planned with your kids together as the united front, that's going to be good for your kids. The big thing to remember is when you're going through a separation and divorce, you want to assure the children that their needs are going to be looked after, that they're going to be able to continue to see both of you, have relationships with both of you. And finally, of course, and this, believe it or not, kids always think it's their fault, assure them that the separation and divorce is not their fault. The fifth thing you want to do in your divorce to-do list, that's number 5. Well, I know this is cheeky, but it's really important. Every town has that lawyer or 2 or 3 where if your spouse hires that lawyer, it is a freaking nightmare, and it's very expensive, and it's highly combative, and it's toxic, and you're going to be dragged off to court with all kinds of court applications, and it's going to be terrible. One of the things that you want to consider, because lawyers can't act for 2 people at the same time, you might want to consider having an initial consultation with the bullies in your jurisdiction. And if you have that initial consultation, they will automatically be disqualified from representing your ex against you. I know it's cheeky, but you know what's cheeky is dragging families through the court system when they can avoid all of that. It's cheeky lining your own pockets with your client's hard-earned resources when you could have resolved the matter on a much more peaceful and drama-free way. So I know it's cheeky, but I actually think it's a good idea. The number 6 thing you want to do on your divorce to-do list is, the thing to remember is your divorce lawyer, well, they're not your friend, and they're not qualified. What I mean is they're not qualified to be your psychologist or your counselor or your divorce coach or any of that. So what you want to do is, if you are going through the divorce process, is look for other professionals if you need extra support. So for example, if you are leaving an abusive relationship, you might want to seek out a counselor who has an understanding as to the cycle of violence, the difference between coercive, controlling family violence and acute family violence. You might want to seek someone out who's experienced dealing with people with borderline personality disorders or narcissistic personality disorders if you are separating from a very, very high conflict person and you want to ensure that you are able to get through the process in as conflict-free a way as possible. So for example, in my jurisdiction where I live, I have a reputation for being able to take on very, very high conflict files because of my experience with people who have personality challenges and have lots of experience that way, but also because I'm able to direct people to other resources in our community that can help parents and other parties get through the process when they have a high conflict X. So think about, what other professionals do I need? I've had cases where a child's relatively young, like 1.5 or 2 years old, and the mother, in this one case I'm thinking of, literally wouldn't let the child out of her sight. And so the dad wanted to have a relationship with the child. Their relationship wasn't going to continue, that is with the mom, but he had to move forward in the co-parenting relationship. But the mom just had such a hard time letting go, allowing him to spend the child without her being, spend time with the child without her being present. In that particular situation, what happened is that I recommended a parenting coach to this family. So ultimately, they were able to avoid going through protracted, expensive litigation and hired a parenting coach at a fraction of the cost that got them to where they want to be in terms of not only shared parenting, but also where they want to be in terms of a co-parenting relationship with each other. So in your divorce to-do list, what I'm saying is make sure that you think about what other professionals could assist me and my changing family through this process. Number 6 in your divorce to-do list is, of course, the fact that you want to discover, wow, other than litigation, what are the other ways out there? What are the other methods available that I can resolve my family law matter without going to court? So in my jurisdiction, and every jurisdiction is different, in my jurisdiction, for example, we have mediation. Either parties go to mediation with or without lawyers. I prefer with lawyers so that we can get everything drafted and ready to go in one sitting. We have a mediation arbitration. We have 4-way meetings. We have negotiations between lawyers. We have settlement conferences. There's all these methods that are available to parties who are going through that separation without having to go to court. So you want to figure out and find out what are those available resources, those available methodologies in your jurisdiction. Finally, I'm at the penultimate, number 7, what to do in your divorce to-do list. What that is that you do want to ensure, even if you don't hire them right away, an initial consultation with a divorce lawyer, with a family law lawyer in your jurisdiction, where you sit down with them and get some initial legal advice, legal information based upon your unique circumstances. The thing is that although there's a lot of similarities in family law, particularly if you live in a no-fault state, province, or country, particularly if you live in a community property, state, or country, community property is what I mean. Well, the thing is that even though that's true, you also probably have something unique about you and your changing family's situation. Make sure that you sit down with a divorce lawyer as soon as you can, early on in the process, to get a clear idea of your legal rights and your legal responsibilities. So this is Val, and I'm so glad you're here, and much love. If you found this video helpful, and I hope you did, please give it a thumbs up, because if you do that, then this video will be able to reach more people. And as well, if you want to stay in closer touch with me, please ring the little bell icon so that you can subscribe to this channel. This is Val. Much love.